Hello and welcome to One Trek Mind with me, Michael.
And me, Raptor.
And today we're going to be discussing everyone's favorite legacy Trek movie, Star Trek Nemesis.
Are you trying to get us dislikes from the very start?
Always. But no, we wanted to discuss this film because it is notoriously considered to be the beginning of the end for Star Trek in the case of modern Trek. And I think the both of us have a different opinion on the movie, thinking it's not nearly as bad as people make it out to be. So we wanted to discuss various aspects of the film, its shortcomings, its successes, just to kind of get our point across as to why we think this movie isn't quite as bad as some people say, but there is definitely criticisms that are warranted with this film as well.
For sure. I mean, let's just say that we are not saying in this video that Nemesis is a fantastic Star Trek film. It's probably not in my top 5, but I think it's fair to say, or at least in my opinion, that I see far too much hatred against Star Trek Nemesis, and I think Nemesis does some things better than a lot of other Trek films, so I do think it's worthy of a little bit of defense. Although I thought I would start with an interesting, just some figures here. So Nemesis came out in December 2002, and in the same year we had things like the second of the Star Wars prequels come out.
The Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter.
Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter. A lot of powerful movies came out in the year, so Nemesis was already off to a bad start. It had a $60 million budget and only earned $67 million worldwide. So, not the best showing.
That's not just not the best. That's very, very bad. That's not even breaking even.
Yeah, that is pretty poor. So, maybe it's a good thing to start with the criticisms. What are some of the often held negatives that Nemesis gets accused of a lot? I see a lot of people criticize the plot quite a bit. That Shinzon and this connection to Picard is not particularly fantastic in the film.
I mostly agree that it's not great, but I also don't think it's terrible. I would call it serviceable. It's just okay. It's a pretty humdrum, there's a clone of me plot going on here, where the clone is evil, I am not, kind of thing.
Yeah, you yourself pointed out that Tom Hardy does not particularly look like Picard.
No, I think he's a great actor. In every movie I've seen Tom Hardy in, including this one, I think he does a really good job with what he's given, but I don't think he looks very much like Picard. If I'm correct, they did apply some prosthetics to his face to try and make him look a little bit more like him, but even then, it's not really working with me. They even have a throwaway line where it's just oh yeah, they broke my jaw, they broke my nose, to kind of try and get around it, but I'm nice try, but no.
I also don't think that this film is helped by where Trek was at the time. Obviously, Enterprise was running up the so-called franchise fatigue problem. I mean, we've both spoken about this before. We don't think it really was a franchise fatigue issue. We think it was more of a Star Trek just wasn't being well handled at the time issue.
It hasn't been well handled since, really.
And I don't think this film was helped by the fact the Star Trek Insurrection, of the 4 next generation films. But if you look at First Contact, Insurrection, and Nemesis, I don't really rate Insurrection very highly. I think it's the worst of the 3, personally. And I don't think it was helped by the fact that First Contact was so, this is amazing. How do you came out too strong, too fast.
Well, I mean, not too fast. It was their third of the Star Trek movies.
First Contact was the second of the Next Generation one.
Oh, it was the second? I swore it was the third one.
No, you had Generations, which is their mixing of the original series and Next Gen cast together.
Which I thought was an okay movie.
Then you had First Contact, which was pure TNG, which was overwhelmingly great. And then you had Insurrection, which I've always thought was a little dull. And then you had Nemesis. And I don't think it was helped that Nemesis came off the back of Insurrection.
No, probably not. Although it seems Insurrection has a larger fan base than Nemesis does, which I find to be a little odd, considering Insurrection really is just a long TNG episode, and not even like a very good one at that. I would agree, I think it's kind of dull. It's a little bit boring for what it is. Not bad per se, just kind of boring is all.
And obviously Nemesis gets a lot of flack for the sexual assault scene between Shinzon and Troy, which we'll discuss in a minute, I think. I would like to go over a few positive things before we get to that.
Okay.
Just off the back, I think Nemesis has one of the most interesting openings to the first few minutes I think are really, really good. Seeing Romulus on the big screen for the only time we ever see Romulus on the big screen.
Well, technically we get to see it blow up in the Abrams movies. I'm just saying.
That's dark. No, the first time we get to see proper Romulus on the big screen and the goings on in the Imperial Senate and the assassination of the entirety of the Romulan political leadership due to the Thalaron radiation device that gets planted in there. And it's also one of the rare times I think Star Trek veers into the sort of gory / grim territory that it very rarely ever usually strays into. I mean, watching them basically turn to ash in grisly detail is quite the opening.
Yeah, it was a shocking moment that I think surprisingly works well.
And I think, I would say this is the case throughout the whole film, the music as well was really good.
Yeah.
I think the soundtrack to Nemesis is really, really good. And yeah, and then from there, the film, much like what we were saying last week about Star Trek films needing to be more action heavy, I would say Nemesis certainly fulfills that requirement of being full of action.
Yeah, and I mentioned in that previous video as well, a Star Trek movie, I think, again, needs to have more action in it to warrant being on the big screen, but at the same time, it still needs to feel like Star Trek. It needs to maintain a certain kind of tone that puts it in line with the rest of the series, and I feel like this movie struck that balance pretty well, actually. You still had quieter scenes of characters discussing either morality or basic interpersonal kind of conflicts, while also having these big action extravaganzas. So I think it actually struck the balance pretty well, which it would seem most people do not agree with, because again, there's a lot of hatred directed towards this movie, specifically at the fact that there is so much action. But I truly think if you're gonna have a movie in theaters, you kind of need some excitement, which something like Insurrection was really bad about and did not have nearly enough of. Whereas this one, I think, had, again, plenty of it, but not so much that it felt like the Section 31 movie where it was just action sequence after action sequence. It actually did allow you to breathe in between those big moments.
And I felt like all the action sequences as well, you can understand what is going on, which is something that Section 31 also fails miserably. And I would say sometimes Discovery and Picard also failed quite miserably to achieve, was the half the time you just can't see the fighting because either it's too dark or the camera keeps snapping away or it's not a very stable, it's shaky cam everywhere or the lighting. It's just, if you're going to have a fight, it would be nice to see what's going on with it. And I think all the way through Nemesis, every action sequence, pretty obvious what's going on.
True.
I think one thing we both agreed on as well that was good was the CGI still holds up in many cases, and the Enterprise E has never looked so beautiful.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen the Enterprise E in 4K on the Picard show, the way they did with Voyager and a couple other big ships. But
yeah, I'm surprised there was no Sovereign class in the Fleet Museum. in season 3 of Picard.
I'm surprised there was no Sovereign class just in operation in that show, because it's not exactly like an ancient ship or anything. But yeah, it looked really good in this movie. There were a lot of really solid beauty shots of the ship that I quite enjoyed.
I think that comes to a head quite a bit in the ship battle towards the end, but we'll get to that in a minute, because I do want to talk to you about the Argo and what is, I believe, Star Trek's only car chase ever.
Well, not ever. Not anymore.
Has there been one since?
The Sand Chaser sequence in Discovery now.
Oh, I forget about that.
Which I actually kind of liked. I thought that one was not bad.
Technically, they're on bikes, so I still think we can call Nemesis the car chase.
I suppose.
But yeah, I see a lot of differing opinions about this. Some people think it's cringy and doesn't belong in Star Trek, and I see some people like it. So I do find it interesting that less than a year after Halo Combat Evolved comes out with its Warthog, Nemesis has a Star Trek version of a Warthog in its film.
I have mixed feelings on the sequence, because on one hand, honestly, I think it makes sense for there to be a ground vehicle. That is one thing about all of Star Trek that comes before it that never made any sense to me, was like, okay, we're on the planet now, let's walk everywhere. I'm like, you have long distances you're traveling here. Would you not have some sort of ground transportation of some sort? So I think them having that vehicle makes perfect sense. I have no issues with that.
Yeah.
I don't particularly like the design of it, because it does feel... It just looks like an ATV or like a four-wheeler to me. I think they could have worked on making it look a little more sci-fi, personally. But the actual chase sequence, again, I'm a little mixed on, because for an action sequence, like a chase scene, I think it's fine. I don't really have any problems with it. I just have an issue with the weapons, because on the enemy like ground transportation vehicles, they basically just have like guns. Like, I
mean, they are a pre-industrial, that they're classified as a pre-warp industrial civilization, so I suppose it makes sense for them to have that.
I mean, I guess so. It just seemed out of place to me. I was just like, oh, what the hell? Like, they're shooting like machine guns at them. It just took me out of it a little bit when I noticed that. But the actual chase itself, I found to be like, it was fun, and it was not unwelcome. So again, I think it's an all right sequence. I'm not like over the moon about it, but I don't think it deserves the like vitriol that it seems to get.
And I suppose that brings us round to talking about the plot in general, since, you know, that car chase scene is sort of the first part of the plot. Briefly summing it up, Romulans do Romulan things and decide to clone Captain Picard, and then intend to replace him with a Romulan agent, which I've always thought is a very Romulan thing to do. I don't think it's completely out of the ordinary for them to have considered doing that. Then new government comes in power. They decide they want to get rid of Clone. They send Clone to their slave dilithium mining planet of Remus. Clone child ends up befriending the Reman outcasts, grows in power through the Dominion War, then assassinates all of the Romulan leadership with the intention to take over the Romulan Empire and commit an act of war, I suppose you could say, but I would say terror, against the Federation by using his Thaleron weapon to kill everyone on planet Earth and then have the Romulans invade. And throughout the rest of the film, there is this persistence of Shinzon and Picard being having the same genetics but being different people. And one of the problems I think that we'll have to discuss with the plot is, you mentioned how the film kind of skirts near the idea of genetics determining too much of the behavior, which is something that later treks have definitely overly done to their detriment.
They've leaned into it in a way that feels very eugenics-y, and it's not cool. But again, in this movie, they at least attempt to avoid that by having a few moments where they'll establish the fact that, like, yes, we have the same genetics, but our upbringing is what has altered the course of our lives and turned us into the people we've been, which I thought was good. I'm like, okay, we skirted into eugenics territory for a second, but they kind of course corrected as they went through the movie, which I appreciated. But I do think it kind of started a trend with a lot of modern Trek that has led to things like the 4.5 Vulcans episode, which just felt gross and weird.
Yes, and was borderline racist.
I wouldn't say borderline. I would say it is. Like, it's pretty clear-cut, like, racist.
Sticking with something good, though, that comes from the plot, obviously this film is the one that establishes who the Remans are and what their place is in Romulan society. Remus has been known about since the Romulans were even a thing. But this is the first time they're ever shown on screen or given any backstory as this downtrodden Romulan slave people. I think they for an alien species in Star Trek, they actually look rather good. They have the very distinctive, you called it almost vampiric.
Yeah, I was gonna say they look like vampires, especially with their whole they don't like the light kind of thing. I was like, oh, so they're like alien vampires. That's kind of cool. They have big fangs and everything.
So yeah, I'm glad to see they just weren't Romulans that were like different skin color or something.
No, yeah, they went for something kind of unique for their look, which I thought was cool.
But this is where we have to talk about what probably gives this film the most hatred, which is the telepathic assault on Deanna Troi. Which I was a little disturbed. We went and watched the deleted scenes footage, and the way that the director was talking about the attack on Troi and how they were going to have another one and how he was going on about how well it was shot and stuff, it did make me feel a bit gross because we both agree that wasn't necessary to have in the film for later purposes. Deanna Troi showing her capabilities on the bridge, being able to telepathically locate the enemy ship while under cloak. You didn't have to have her being mind-read in order to have that be achieved.
Agreed. It just felt like it was in poor taste. It felt like a shock value kind of scene for the sake of shock, whereas doesn't really add anything to the character of Shinzon. It doesn't really add anything to the character of Deanna. It's just there to be gross, which I am not a fan of at all. I think it is something that could have been cut from the film entirely and would have made the movie a lot better for it.
And then Picard's response, you were pretty... Like, on a rewatch, I was kind of horrified at how laissez-faire Picard is in response to what happens. Just a member of your crew can be telepathically attacked by a member of the enemy crew. That in itself is a danger to the security of the ship. But then when it's revealed that it's a mind rape, his response is, I'm not gonna take you off of duty. I need you at my side if you can endure more of these attacks. It's a very heartless response.
Yeah, it was very much a deal with it kind of response. And I was like, are you being like dead ass right now, Picard? Because that's really fucked up.
It was really fucked up. I think that is what overwhelmingly, I think, perhaps gives Nemesis its bad reputation, is that sequence. Because it damn near almost ruins the whole film.
I agree. And the fact that there was supposed to be 2 of these sequences just makes it even worse. I'm like, you're telling me you were going to do it again? And make it even worse? Like, how did that get through the writer's room where they're like, oh no, yeah, let's proceed with this? Like, I don't know. It was a really classless kind of decision to keep that in the movie.
But let's lead to some other things that I think are really good. Like you said about Tom Hardy, I think Tom Hardy does a good job with what he's given here, and I find Shinzon to be almost tragic. I mean, I don't think the film succeeds entirely, but I do kind of get the gist of what they were going for. The clone who's been abandoned and left to die and been taken in by a group of other downtrodden individuals and finds a family there, and that leads him down a path of hating the Romulans, but also hating humanity because he hates himself, essentially.
Yeah, it's not bad.
I kind of get what they were going for.
I do think plot-wise it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that the Romulans would send him off to be slave labor. I'm like, if they had
just kill him.
Yeah, I'm like, if they had a clone of Picard that they said, okay, we're not doing this anymore, I'm like 99% sure the Romulans would have just executed him and been like, okay, failed project, kill him. But instead they're like, let's let this be a problem for someone else at some point and just send him off to the mines. And I'm like, I don't really think that makes a lot of sense, but
it's a bit like the D-Rex in Jurassic Park Rebirth. Like, why would you just keep a failure around? Why wouldn't you just kill it?
Just get rid of it. Like, that may be cold and heartless, but it seems like that would be the smarter option. But I mean, I agree that I think he as a character is okay. Like, I don't have any major issues with it. It's a decent attempt at making a somewhat sympathetic villain, but his ultimate plan, at least for me, of like, let's use this Thalaron radiation to destroy all of Earth and, the rest of the Federation and all of the Romulans. It's just too mustache twirly for me to be really good. It's sort of like, okay, box standard evil plan for the villain, so it just doesn't work for me in like the grand scheme of things. But I think he specifically as a character, when you're talking about his backstory, it's good. It works for me. It's just his overall plan makes him a little too evil for me to really get behind the whole sympathetic side of things.
This film also has a bit of a problem with the scimitar in itself. It is very much along the lines of the J.J. Abrams, look at my super ship that's so much bigger and badder than yours. I've even painted it black again.
I mean, I thought it was silver.
No, it is black. It is a blackish. It's shiny black, but it is black. And yes, it's massive compared to the Enterprise. It's massively overpowered in terms of firepower. It can fire its weapons through cloak, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. We'll discuss that in a sec.
It's also like an impenetrable cloak that can't be tracked, which I'm like, yes, that seems like some handy technology that you would think others would want or utilize on their ships at some point, but I don't think that's ever been the case since the scimitar.
And then it has, the Death Star style, overly complicated Thalaron radiation emitter as well. I remarked to you that I look at this film in the same way that I look at Jurassic Park 3, because in a way they are both films that start doing things that then later films and shows took to extremes and ran with, necessarily for the degradation of what came after. Plots where it was always the entire universe is at risk every other week, and super powerful, awesome starships that are just, the equivalent of I'm going to build my own super ship, and bad guys that don't really feel very interesting.
Yeah, I would agree that a lot of modern Trek kind of took the worst elements about this movie and ran with it. Not to say that all modern Trek has. Again, there's been arcs and episodes of Discovery that I quite liked. There have been individual moments of Picard that I like, and most of Strange New Worlds I have liked, with the exception of most of the new season. But there are a lot of things that they've kind of ran with in terms of over the top unnecessary action sequences. Again, like really super duper evil villains that are just evil because, or in some cases, you know, they have like a reason for being so, but they still do like heinously evil things that are almost laughable. And it's kind of frustrating to see that they've ran with these things in particular, because there are like good elements to this movie, but I can see why people say like this was the beginning of the end for Star Trek, because it does hold a lot of those things in pretty prominent ways.
But one thing I think is the best part of this film, and I think I would say the best sequence in any of the Star Trek films, has to be the space battle that marks the end act of the film. Prolonged starship engagement between the Enterprise, the Scimitar, and later on two Romulan Norexan or Mogai, whichever one you want to call it, but I go with the original one that was written on the script, so Norexan class warbirds. I think this is, and I will defend this, the best starship battle in Star Trek. Most people go with the slower paced submarine duel that is the Wrath of Khan between the Enterprise and the Reliant in the Nebula. And I suppose you could also say some of the fight scenes in Deep Space Nine were also very good, but as far as I'm concerned, peak Star Trek ship battle is this sequence in Nemesis. I think it is awesome.
I actually agree. It's really nice to see the ships moving around with both a feeling of weight to them. Like they feel like very large ships engaging in combat, but at the same time there's like a gracefulness to it. There's a lot of choreography going on with how the ships are moving around, and I think we both agree in Discovery in particular, and in a lot of others, they just kind of stay in one place and shoot their weapons at each other. Not all the time. Like Discovery has had at least like one or two sequences where they kind of tried to correct that, and Strange New Worlds has had a couple sequences where their ships will be moving around. Not a whole lot of space battles in that show, but the ones that are there's some movement to it and everything. And I'll even admit, Picard, at least in its final season, like that big ending sequence with the Borg, there was a lot of kinetic movement through that sequence, which was good. I
wouldn't say that sequence in Picard made the Enterprise look graceful.
Well, I'm not talking about Enterprise. I'm talking about, I guess the new Enterprise, the Titan, in that case, when it's like...
Oh, I thought you were referring to the shots of the Enterprise D doing its Death Star trench run.
No, I'm talking about when Seven of Nine is captaining the ship, and they're like swinging through the
Borg-controlled fleet.
The whole fleet, and you see it like tilting on its side and moving as fast as it can to not be targeted. Like that I thought was actually pretty good. And here in Nemesis, again, it's exciting. Like it's a lot of back and forth where you have the ups and downs of a battle, which are really important to script writing, where it seems like they're down on their luck and then they get a break and they start to turn the tides of battle, and then it turns again. It was actually pretty darn good, and I really like that for once Deanna Troi came in clutch in this situation. There's so many times where I feel like she is sidelined as a character, where she's just like, oh, my abilities just aren't strong enough, I can't do anything about this. But here she's like, nope, I'm going to pinpoint exactly where they are, and I'm going to get us a leg up in this battle. And I thought that was really good.
Yeah, and kind of related to that, I feel like both sides demonstrate tactical ingenuity, which you would expect to see being so soon after the Dominion War. This is both crews post Dominion War, and they demonstrate that. I mean, we have the that brilliant the phaser sweeping thing to try to find a ship under cloak,
which was cool. That was really cool.
Captain Kirk never thought about trying that to detect Chang's cloaked bird of prey in Star Wars 6. Picard is like, no, we'll do this to try to find it, and then Shinzon switches to concentrating his fire, and so the Enterprise veers away. Then the Romulans come in, and Shinzon is definitely on the back foot, so he has to focus targeting on the Romulans, takes one out with that tearing a wing off it, which I think is, again, it's nice to see actual Star Trek ships also taking damage because of obviously the problems of legacy shows. They're more willing to do it now because it's all CG, but back in the day, starships very rarely ever took visible damage, whereas here everything takes visible damage. But yeah, but both sides using tactical guile and initiative, and then it ramps up to the point where Picard rams the scimitar with the Enterprise in something that I felt had a lot more weight and a lot more effect than, say, the Discovery ramming itself into the ground in the last season of Discovery.
Yeah.
That sequence, which was also done with practical effects, you know, they rammed a practical model of the Enterprise at 30 miles an hour into a scimitar. It just feels like there's so much weight to every movement. Like the entire bridge was on hydraulic gimbals so they could actually rock the crew about as opposed to just shifting the camera about.
Which they've adopted into pretty much all of modern Trek because it's a really solid way to get the actors to like get in the moment.
It feels realistic.
Yeah. It was always funny in older Trek whenever the ship would get rocked by something and you'd see people like diving in different directions. You're like, oh, they were not in sync on that one.
No, here it actually feels like they're under attack. And yeah, it's just a fantastic fight. Exciting. The music's fantastic. The choreography is great. The backdrop being in the Basin Rift, this eerie green nebula. It's just great. I love it. And then I suppose this then leads me on to what I think is the film's biggest strength, in that Data's death feels meaningful here.
I agree. They spend the whole movie building his character up. You have B4 being like his brother that he's trying to lift up to kind of the same status that he is. You have a lot of scenes with him and Picard discussing like how far they've come, what they plan on doing in the future. I do think they kind of fudged it up a little bit by not having him have more scenes with Geordi, considering that's his best friend, but I can kind of understand why they maybe didn't have the time for it in this particular movie, but I still think that was a slight missed opportunity. But they've spent a lot of the movie really building Data up as this character that is irreplaceable and people love, and then when they finally do kill him off, it really does hit you. Like, you have this feeling of genuine loss from losing the character, and it doesn't feel like it comes out of nowhere, and two, it
doesn't feel overly emotional. Like, you know, like everyone on the bridge after they realize is just kind of shocked.
Yeah, but I mean, I wouldn't have minded if they did take a more overly emotional approach to it, because again, I'm an overly emotional person. I like to cry at movies and everything, so I think they could have taken it further than they did, but I'm not upset that they didn't. It felt appropriate for this movie and everything. I noticed it hit me less the second time than it did the first, and that's not just because I knew it was coming, it was because I knew he was going to come back to life, which kind of ruins it a little bit for me. And I don't blame this movie for that. That obviously wasn't the original plan here.
No, that's definitely the fault of Picard Season 1, because I think
and 3.
This film was a perfect ending to his character arc. I thought it was a perfect way to end the Next Generation crew's time in Star Trek. I thought it was meaningful. He sacrifices himself to save Picard, who he has a close personal connection to, and everybody else on the ship. And he takes the ultimate action of I would argue in that sacrificing himself is probably the ultimate act of humanity that the character has been progressing towards.
Yeah, no, I would agree.
And then in season 1, they retcon all of that to bring him back for another tedious death sequence, which wasn't necessary.
And then they bring him back again in season 3 fully just to be alive again, which, again, I love the character of Data, and I think he did a good job on his return in season 3, but I really wish not even just Star Trek, but movies and shows in general would stop doing these fake out deaths or bringing characters back to life. Like, you need to have consequences. You need to really feel the loss of somebody. And if you're not willing to lose the actor who you think like, oh, we love them so much, then just don't kill them off. Like, don't pretend to kill them off. Just keep them if that's what you're going to do. And in this case, I think Nemesis did a good job with the death scene, but again, because I knew this time around that he was coming back, it was sort of like, I don't really feel all that much from this death sequence because I know he's coming back. But the first time I watched it, before we had watched Picard and everything, I cried. I was actually really sad. I really, really was upset that they killed off Data. Overall, I would just say, again, this movie has its problems. It's not one of my favorite of the Star Trek films, but it's also not one of my least favorite. I'd put it somewhere firmly in the middle. I think the hate on this movie is overly exaggerated to the point of almost being kind of annoying. I think if you hate this film, you are well within your rights to, because there are plenty of things to criticize about it. But the amount of people who say that this is the death of Star Trek, I personally think that is an over-exaggeration. And I think this movie is fine. It has a lot of things that I like, a lot of things that I dislike. As I said, I'd put it somewhere firmly in the middle. But I am curious as to what you all think. I'd love to hear in the comments what your opinions of this movie are. Like, do you agree with us that it is an overhated movie? Or do you disagree with us and think, no, it deserves every bit of vitriol that it does get? I'm curious to see.
I personally rate quite a few films lower than this. The Final Frontier being one of them.
Yeah, oh yeah. Final Frontier, I think, was a trash movie, personally. Like, I really, really despise that movie.
But yeah, let us know down in the comments what you think. And obviously, don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you like hearing us talk about Star Trek. Not sure what our next video will be. We'll have to come up with something. Perhaps something a little shorter than a nearly hour-long discussion. But until then, it is goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.